How is everyone doing this fine morning? So, all week I've been looking at this pocket watch I've got. It's a Elgin pocket watch. Here I got some Rodico with a balance staff stuck to it. This is the original balance staff for this watch. As I've shown you in another video, I made a brand new balance staff. Looked kind of like that. Worked perfectly with one exception. So the roller table would punch onto the bottom there and put the balance staff in here, and then put the balance cock back on. And then I noticed like it was running perfectly in this way with face down. And then I flip the watch around and it would stop. So I'm like, oh, okay, what the heck is going on here? So I had a look at the pivot that I made on this end here. The pivot is, I'll just see if I can do a close-up here. There, that's pretty close there. So I'm looking at my screen right now so I can make sure it's focused. But you'll see the pivot on the right is the one that worked perfectly. The pivot on the left is a bit fat. Even though it seems to fit into the jewel, it really doesn't. It just sort of rides in the edge of the hole of the jewel. Now, the trouble I'm going to have here is that if, you know, when I'm going to put this back in my lathe and trim that pivot back a bit, very carefully, and when I place it back into the watch, the balance cock here, can I get a close up here? A little bit maybe. There's the jewel hole for the that has to go into, and there's a bit of a cone as it goes in, so an indented cone as it goes in. And I am concerned that once I trim the pivot down, maybe there's going to be too much end shake on this particular pivot, because the pivot should go through the hole and then be able to see if I can fit that in here. Is that possible? It should go through the hole, and then the cap jewel on the end would stop the pivot. Basically the top of the pivot would hit the cap jewel on the end, so that'd be the perfect situation. But I have this sneaky suspicion when I do this that I'm going to end up with too much end shake, which I'm not sure. You can lower the jewel a bit, but that's a little bit tricky. So at the end of the day, I may end up having to make a brand new balance staff, which I didn't want to do for this because it was working super well with the with the face down. It was working incredibly well, great amplitude, but the minute I flipped it over, it died. So I'm going to try to shave some material off that pivot on my lathe. So I'll find the right whatever it's called. Anyway, I'll shave it off. The right whatever it's called. Anyway, I'll size it, put it in the lathe, and then I'll use one of my stones to take more material off that pivot and see if I can fit that in there and then get the thing working in both positions. So that's the challenge I've got right now today. And I'm at home. My wife asked me if there's any difference in watchmaking now that we've got this COVID-19 outbreak, and hopefully people know that the 19 stands for the year that it was discovered. A little bit of tidbit of information there, and really there's less communication with other people that might want to send me a watch to do some repair or whatever, because I'm not going to coffee shops and hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So there's a little bit less, but I'm working on some pocket watches that have needed some attention for some time. So that's the difference. So the first thing I need to do, hopefully this is a little bit, is fit the collet, the right size collet. Now this is a size 6, so 6 millimeter collet. I tried a 5, but it wouldn't snug down right down to the end, so I'm going to use a 6, and there we go. So the 6 fits perfectly. And what I do is I fit this. So if I can rotate this a little bit, put the collet into the lathe like so, and then you wait till you feel the notch here, because there's a groove there that fits into right there, that fits into a notch that's in the base of this lathe. And this is I believe this is my old Bowley lathe. Like I said, I got too many lathes, so I gotta someday maybe get rid of some. But that's, and you tighten that up a bit. You just back this off just a bit. See if this, there you go. You hold the spindle here and you tighten it just a bit, and then take the part. I got the camera on the wrong side, but whatever. So I could reattach the camera. Why don't I do that just for a second? There we go. I've zoomed in a bit there, but the tip over tool rest is out of the way. Probably going to hit the camera here, but so you take the part here. You've loosened, basically held the spindle here, the pulley for the spindle, and or the pulley for the headstock, and you just have to fit this part in and then squeeze it. So I gotta get in close. Again, I keep, everybody that makes videos on watchmaking complains about having to do work while they're making the video, so I too complain. So there we go. So that's in there. Now the tricky part here, I'll plug my lathe in here. The tricky part is to, and when I spin this, is this going to be running true, or is it going to be wiggling all over the place? I can see that the balance itself is moving a bit. So what I'm going to do here is see if I can level this off with a toothpick. So this is going to be harder because of the angle here, but usually just loosen it a bit, just a bit like that, and then you run a toothpick on the bottom, and it kind of centers the piece of metal within the collet. So I'm hoping this works and doesn't damage anything. Now the question is that centered? Actually, that's not bad. Seems to be spinning. The balance is relatively flat, and I think I can work on this. I think I can work on the end of that without a big problem. So I'm going to try to do that. Got to get in there with my head out of the way, so this could be tricky. Now the tip over tool rest also needs to be adjusted, so I got to loosen that. Trying to remember which way. Oh, there we go. Loosey goosey, tighty schnighty, however that goes. Looks like I haven't cleaned this off from last time, but just move it over like this and then bring it in a little bit closer. You can't have this hit the balance. That would be BAD. So, and then I got to move this back a bit, like so. And because I'm going to go in there with a graver and move just a little bit of material off the edge there, off that, sort of take the cone away a bit. So I'm going to use one of my rounded gravers to do that. This is my little pack of gravers here. I'm going to take some of these out. These are the mini ones I have that are like this, and they're in a container. And I've got them marked as like 2R is 2 round, and I've got 4 round, and then 4 flat, and then 2 flat. But these things, I'll open this up and show you. These are pretty exceptional carbide gravers, and the end of these, right on the end there, is a super fine. The end of these, and they're actually round on the end, like so, which the whole graver is kind of rounded on the end, so when you sharpen it, the end stays round. So when I attack this just stick this into the holder here, and when I attack the balance staff with this, I've got, yeah, they just fit in this, by the way. I've got to make sure that I'm not going to hit the balance. So when I come in at an angle like that, I got to make sure it's the exact right angle. So my tool rest is a little bit high, so I'm going to lower that a bit. See if that helps. Like that. And then tighten that up. Make sure this is tight, everything is tight. I've got to switch to my super duper close goggles. These guys here, made in China. So I switched to these, and let me see if I can get in tight here and see what this, and you just have to touch it because I don't want to take too much material off. So that's pretty good there. So I'll see if I can spin this and not cause any additional problems. So here we go. One thing when you're doing this is that you're putting a little tiny bit of pressure on the end of that pivot, and it wants to go underneath. And if it wants to go underneath, just let it go underneath, because if you fight it, you'll break the end of the pivot off, and then that'll be that for the pivot. So you gotta not fight that, right? So that I did take some material off there. And I might use a stone now to take some more material off. See if I can take a little bit more here. Alright, so I took enough material off. Now I got to flip to the stone and work on it with the stone a bit to remove a little more material. Now to do that, I just take the flip over tool rest out of the way, and here's my stone. I'm not going to add any oil to the stone because it's such fine work that I believe I will ruin it if I add oil. So I'm just going to go in here like this and spin this and rub it very easily. So very fine work on it. So let me see if I can. So that is removing material from the pivot. And I want to make sure that pivot sinks right into that jewel hole without an issue and doesn't bottom out on the cone part of the pivot. But I think that's what was happening. So I'm trimming the cone down a bit. I believe the pivot was the right size, just the cone got in the way. Now that I've trimmed it down a bit, I can get out my burnisher. This is a burnishing tool. On one side it's a file, and to file down the size of the pivot, and it's rounded on the edge, so you can get in there nice and tight, and the very end part is smooth on the end here. There's no real filing part on the edge here. If you go down further, there is, so if you want to work on the pivot that way. Here it's just going to remove material from the pivot, so I don't want to use that end of it, so I'll flip to the other side, and then this still has leftover oil from it, which is fine. So it's rounded on this side here, and this is just steel, and there's lines across the steel like this, and then when you rub it this way, it's going to burnish the pivot, which will smoothen it out a bit. So There, have a look at the end. I think that the tip of the pivot is flat, so I think I'm good there. I don't think I need any work there. You can just use the non-rounded edge here and get at it for a second here. Right, there we go. Now what I'm going to do is take this out here, put it into movement without the spring on it, see if it spins, see what the end shake is like, and then test it and see if I did anything here at all. Well, there's the movement. I think I may have to focus a bit more, but or just go in closer maybe. It should be good there, right, ladies and germs? There's the watch. Let me see, do I shift that around? Up, down, left, right. Okay, there we go. So there we go there. So the balance is here somewhere. Oh no, it's still in the lathe. So just remove that from the, loosen that up and remove that from the lathe. There, I got it right there. There's the balance. So I need to put some glasses on here because I can't see a damn thing. Where are my glasses? Oh, there we go. Put them over on the side. Anyway, get back at this here. So there it is there. So upside downside. I'm just going to take some Rodico. I just put it like a snail and just dab the end of both these pivots, right, to take out any loose material, and then let me just drop this into place here and see what kind of action I get when I turn this thing upside down. So there we go, put that in place. So there we go there. Not a lot of room between like the base of this and the plate itself. It's pretty tight. So let's see if I'm able to get anything here. See if this works at all. And I got to make sure when I put this down that the jewel doesn't crush that pivot. This balance cock seems to be, it fits fairly tight, which I don't like, but it's not my decision here. So it's in there now. I'm not sure if it's sitting in the jewel hole yet, but it seems to be, the bottom one seems to not be fitting right at the moment. So we got some, there we go there. I think I have to put the screw back in here because I won't be able to test whether it's fit right unless the screw's back in here. So let me grab a screwdriver here, and the trick here is to not crush the pivot if it's not aligned properly, so, which I don't want to do, right, because that's pretty dangerous. It seems like I got some there's some play there. Now I'll take my puffer. This is a puffer. This is a vintage one too, and a little bit of air on the side, and it shows that it's running perfectly down still. And I'm not sure whether when I put it sideways will it run nicely. Yeah, it seems like it's continuing to run like this, and I probably won't be able to show you down. Oh, look at that. It seems to be, yeah, seems to be running down. I'm going to flip my camera around just so you can see. Just hang on a second. So there it is upside down, and I try to center this a bit and not get too close. There we go. And if a little bit of air on that, and look at that baby run. So that's running upside down. So by taking a little tiny bit of material off the cone of that pivot, it was able to fit in there really nicely. So this watch should now run really well. So So let me just reassemble the thing and see what I got. Now when reassembling this balance, I've got my roller table here, right? And I've got my hairspring, and I've got my hit the camera, the old hit the camera. I've got my hairspring here, and before I took the hairspring off, I put a little mark with a marker right there. Put a little mark on the balance, so I know the stud, right, will line up with that mark on the balance. Try not to snap that. Gotta be very careful with this. So that's like that, right? So the balance goes on like so. So you got to make sure you put everything in the right side, right? So the balance goes on like that. The hairspring would go on. So you can move this over so you can see it. So the hairspring would go on like this, right? On the balance, of course, and then the balance itself, the roller table, the direction of the roller table has to fit the it has to be at 90 degrees to these arms, and then the balance is like this. So, and right here is where the banking pins are. So if you align this up perfectly with the stud in place, so in this case, if I've got my mark right there, right, which means it was like that, then the roller table has to go on like this. So if I flip this around like that, I know that the roller table has to go on this side like that. So this is the side I got to punch the roller table on, so like that, and it's got to be at exactly 90 degrees. If I don't do it 90 degrees, then my bead error is going to be off. So I'm going to punch this roller table on at 90 degrees and get that done. What I've done here is I've picked a stump where the hairspring side of the balance staff will fit into this stump, and in these staking sets the stump fits into one of these holes nicely, that one there, and then I've got to align that stump perfectly, I must like a Boston guy, perfectly with this. So there's my alignment, and just put that, because this moves around as you can see, right? So just align that like that, and then move it around a bit so it's nice and aligned, and then tighten that so that's tight. Move my and then let's get my play-by-play here, the old play-by-play. Then I take the balance, and you need a stump for this because you're pushing the roller table back onto this, and the arms here could get warped if you can't put it flat like that and push it on, because it'll warp the arms. So you put it like this, and I picked the stump that was pretty perfect. And so now when I tap that table on, that should go straight down without a problem. So the next thing I do is I've got to find a stake that's going to go over all this stuff to tap it down. I don't need to, I can probably just eyeball a stake, but I want a flat stake. So, and I don't really have to worry, well, actually I do have to worry. I don't want to compress the jewel, the impulse jewel, so I want the stake to go over but not interfere with the jewel. So I have to look down and make sure that that stake with the hole here is going to go over all this, which it just has. I also want to make sure that this is at 90 degrees, so let me have a look at that again, and it's not at 90 degrees. It could move a bit, and just have a look at it, and you can kind of eyeball the 90 degrees. If you don't have it right on, then the next thing you have to do is you've got to adjust the hairspring then, so that you have perfect the jewel is perfectly aligned with the banking pins. You don't have other issues. So that's it there. So let me just tap this in and see if it just stays. So that should be good. You have a look and see how deep that went. And yeah, that's right in on the table. So that's perfect. So I've got the roller table with the jewel in. I didn't touch the jewel. That was the right stump to pick to put that on top. And I just tapped down on it, and it put the roller table in position. Now I got to put the hairspring back on. I got to put the hairspring on. Make sure I didn't crush the hairspring here and all this nonsense. Oh, there it is sitting on top of the movement. So just flip this around, and I've got a little block here, and you just find a hole that's the right size. You want it to fit exactly. It's the preferred thing, right? So also you can examine the balance again to make sure it's not warped from tapping that roller table on. Now I think it should be as simple as so the roller table, the jewel for the roller table, the impulse jewel, is on this side here, which means it would be on this movement like so, lined up, which means the mark right there's a little tiny mark for the hairspring. I'm going to zoom in for this. Alright, it's about as zoomed in as I want to be here. So now I have to take this hairspring and press it on to the balance, and as I look at that closely, I want to align it as close as I can to that little mark that was that I left. So that's good there. I want to move it just a little bit more. And you can take a very fine screwdriver here, and you just put it into the trick is holding everything well, and just put it into the little gap there and move it sideways a bit. There we go, that's perfect. Now I just want to press that on. So I'll take a stake here and just eyeball the size of the hole in the stake, and that's about right. So I can press this on, like put it into the staking table and do all that stuff, but if I just press down like that, I think that is on. Just have a look at the base to make sure it's in there. It looks like it's in there. And then if I lift that up, that's holding. Yeah, no problem. So that's holding nicely. So that is now on. And now I just have to reinstall it on the balance cock. And once I do that, with any luck, if the gods of balance cocks are on my side, then I will have resolved the problem. So I won't show you me putting it back on the balance because it's such a pain in the butt. I don't want you to see me screwing it up. So, so I'll just do that on my... Oh, I got the balance back on. The hardest part is getting the spring through the regulator pins. And if I've got a balance that's got this has a star regulator on the other side, and if I have a balance that just has a regulator adjuster that just sweeps back and forth, I'll take those regulator pins and move them as far away from where the stud goes as I can, and then I'll put the stud in, and I'll just lift the spring into between the two pins that are like this. So again, pardon for the long fingernails, I do play guitar, as I've said many times. So I'll just do that. In this case, I've got a star configuration, which I really can't move that regulator pins over. So in this case, I'll move it as close as I can to the stud. So when the spring goes in, when the stud goes in the hole here, before I tighten it down, I'll have a good chance of the spring also getting between those pins, the regulator pins. And I'll see if I can get a close-up of that just to show you what it looks like. So I just realized how impossible this is to show you this. I'm just going to try again without moving this a lot. And if I just rock this over just a bit, you'll be able to see the regulator pins. I don't think this is very successful. Maybe if I grab the whole darn thing, and just flip it around. I'll show you me fumbling, and I know that it's kind of, so you can see it from the angle. It's hard to get this thing in front of the camera, actually. There it is there, but I think the lighting is piss poor. So anyway, I'm having a hard time showing you though. There's the regulator pins there. How about I forget doing this and let's just test this watch. You got the idea? Alright, let's see if this thing actually works now. If for some reason it doesn't work, I think I'm still going to publish the video because everything I've done is what you need to do. And if there's a problem of some sort, then I'm going to publish the video anyway. Anyway, what I want to do is put a little bit of tension on the mainspring so that the wheels will also have some tension, and the pallet fork on the bottom there will snap back and forth, and I can just test that with my tweezers and make sure it got, yeah, that's definitely snapping back and forth. So I'm going to swing the pallet fork on this side, that way I can approach the putting the balance back in from this side, because I want the roller jewel, or the impulse jewel, to be on this side as I place it in, and then it'll rotate like this. It'll catch the mouth of the pallet fork, and then with any luck it'll start ticking, or it'll at least be in the right place. If I approached it from this side, then the pallet fork, like a fork like this, the fork would be on this side, and then the jewel would be on the other side, right? And it would be overbanking. You can call it that, but it's overbanking. So it would be stuck on this side and wouldn't be able to enter the mouth of the pallet fork. So to do this, what I do is flip this thing around, nice and easy, so I don't disjog anything or jog anything. Grab it with the tweezers, and I want to approach it from this side, like I said, because I get the pallet forks on that side. So just lower it, just touch it with my finger here so I don't smash it down in there, and then lower it and rotate it like this, and just rotate the movement until it finds till the balance cock gets close enough, and then you can just let it drop down in place like that. And see if I can get this to fall into place. There we go. So that's falling in place, and let me get the screw here. And again, you got to make sure the pivots are in the jewel holes when you tighten this down, because if they're not, there's a whole other problem you're going to have. So just put a little bit of pressure on that, and let me just tighten the screw down, and it should level everything off, hopefully. See if I got some issues there. Oh, there we go. So it's working. So I'm going to tighten it down a bit more. You know that the pivots are in the jewel holes when it starts moving. So there, that's nice and tight. That's super tight there. So I got a bit of movement. It's not, the amplitude doesn't seem to be like it should be right now, but I've farted around with everything in there, and I probably should have oiled it up a bit or something, but it's going. So, and it looks like it's working sideways, and if I put it upside down, it works as well. So I believe I have solved my problem. So there you go. That's how you, let's get this thing going here. That's how you fix a balance to make sure it's running perfectly. So that's my little lesson. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time to get this thing a little bit more amplitude.